I could use this specialist wood repair system. It's a type of filler and it's really good stuff and excellent for heritage building repairs and restoration. But for this old garage door frame, I think it's probably just a little bit too expensive. Now this is more like it. I've used wood hardener, cardboard fibreglass and filler and also wood filler in the past, and it's always worked well. It's also only about a quarter of the cost of that more expensive repair system. As you can see, I've taken out the spliced timber from the early repair and I've cut out all the rotten wood and taken it back to stable timber. I've also applied 2 coats of this wet rot wood hardener to the exposed timber and I've left it to dry as per the manufacturer's specification. Now before I move on, I've got to put in a straight batten and this will give me a good edge for the fiberglass filler when I put it into the repair area. Now I place the wall plugs so the wings will spread vertically. If I place them so they spread horizontally, there's a risk that as the fixings are screwed in, they'll blow out the mortar point into the side because they're really very close to the edge. Now this batten gives me a good straight edge to work to. It'll also ensure the repair follows the line of the original frame. Now I mix the fiberglass filler as per the manufacturer's specification and I'm applying the first coat. It also acts both as a filler and bonding medium for the new piece of wood that I'm going to use to build up the existing frame. I make sure the fiberglass is well packed into the repair area. Now I've used an offcut of oak to act as a packer. I chose oak as it's a hardwood and typically expands less than other woods and it will make the repair more stable. I'm now smoothing off the excess fiberglass that's squeezed out from under the new piece of wood. I'm running a long bladed craft knife between the new fiberglass filler and the edge former. That's the piece of wood I screwed to the wall to give me a clean edge. I did this to make sure that I didn't pull out any of the fiberglass when I removed that former. In addition to the screws I used to fix that piece of oak, I'm now using some brad nails to make sure it's secure. You can use other fixings, but do try to make sure they're rust resistant, because if they do later rust, they can stain the paintwork. I left the repair overnight, but you only need to leave it really until the fiberglass is cured. Having sanded the fiberglass back, it's now time to use some 2-part wood filler. The filler was a bit stiff and that made it a little less pliable than I would have liked. I've also used car body filler for this type of repair, and to be honest I haven't noticed any difference between the two whatsoever. And even though I prefer car body filler, I had some of this stuff laying about, so I used it to save on material costs. I made sure the repair area is well covered with the filler and as flat as I could possibly get it. I always try to get a relatively nice edge on corners, as it can make the sanding stages a little bit easier. After the filler had fully cured, I then sanded it back again to the original surface level. You can do this by hand, but it's far easier with a sander. I again check the surface with a straight edge of some description. Now I'm not looking for perfection here, I'm just trying to keep it in line with the existing frame. Just to remove any noticeable minor imperfections, I then apply a second and final coat of wood filler. I only used as much filler as needed to fill any imperfections. You shouldn't really overdo it here because you're only going to sand it back again. I try to work relatively fast with the filler, as sometimes it cures before you've used it all. After waiting a couple of hours for the filler to cure, I then sanded it back with the sander. I then finished it off with a sanding block and some 80 grit sandpaper. Finally, I move on to just using the sandpaper. This helps us to profile the filler more precisely. I clear the repair area of dust so I can check my work before moving on to the next stage. I'm using a blow line here because it was convenient to hand, but any method will do. Remember, do wear a mask when you do this, even if you're working outside. I'm pleased with that. Now it's ready for some primer. I'm going to use an oil-based primer as I think the adhesion is better on an exterior multi-surface repair. It's a personal choice though. Because I'm repairing an existing frame, I try to match the new paintwork to the original paintwork. Well, that means if the original paint finish is a bit industrial, then I wouldn't want to produce a superbly fine finish, as it will be an obvious repair. That is, unless I'm going to repaint the whole frame, which in this case, I'm not. The primer was dry the following day, so it's time for the top coat. Luckily there was some of the original paint left. It was about 10 plus years old, and I was astonished to find it was as good as when it was new. top coat was touch dry within 4 hours. There's just a tiny bit of pointing to do where the repaired frame meets the brickwork. Well, that's another invisible frame repair done, and in my experience it should easily last 10 plus years before a fresh coat of paint is required.